a few minutes for questions, and I'll try and throw them to each of the panel members. Is anybody going to be brave enough to stick their hand up first? Ah, excellent. I should say that the lights in here means that it's almost impossible to see anybody. So could you, when you're asking the question, could you say who you are and where you're from?
Good afternoon. David Rumble from Bywaters Recycling Waste Management. I heard mentioned the Green Investment Bank in the second gentleman's talk. What I am concerned about with the Green Investment Bank is if it goes down the same road as an organisation called the London Waste and Recycling Board, which has been in existence now for nearly 3 years, and to the best of my knowledge has failed to get any money out into waste infrastructure in London whatsoever. Complete blank. Now, if the Green Investment Bank follows the same procedures and the same plan, it's just going to be a larger version of the same failure, in my opinion. So I just wanted to make that comment and that point clear.
Anybody want to come in on that?
I think I'm more optimistic about the Green Investment Banks. I think the government do realise that they do have to get the money out there. It's obviously a huge institution. It needs to go through a lot of processes to get set up, such as apply for state aid funding and parliamentary legislation.
Which is something the London Waste and Recycling Board didn't do. But
okay. So that's obviously will delay things, but the government recognise that and have got a 3-stage process. And the first process is actually the government undertaking investments, and that'll be done by BIS, and that phase is from April 2012. So it's quite soon. And I think considering how big this project is, that's a pretty good timeline. So hopefully the investment will be flowing.
So I'm not going to be disappointed then.
Well,
that's another question.
It's another question. The big problem with the Green Investment Bank is when we were writing manifestos, and I know across the board all the political parties, the idea of a Green Investment Bank was very, very attractive. The trouble is, after the CSR, how do you actually find the billions of pounds of capitalisation you need for a bank? And although it's getting £2 billion of capitalisation for a bank, actually that's not very large. Doesn't allow you to do a great deal. And then the idea is you should be able to borrow on the back of that. But of course, the constraining factor of that is you've got to actually build up. I mean, it's been a very long time since anybody actually formed a new bank in this country. People usually just take over other people's banks. There is a problem. I'm looking forward to it. For one of the problems is getting money into different sectors, and for AD, we've got a finance meeting coming up where, for the first time, we're actually getting somebody from the Green Investment Bank to come along and talk, because for anaerobic digestion, the Green Investment Bank could be a fantastic opportunity. My caveat is that I don't think it's going to be operating as quickly as a lot of people want, especially as it's almost impossible to borrow money for anything in the sector at the moment.
Richard Griffin, Low Sea Communities. My question revolves around that of one of the comments made earlier, that it's very difficult to find a good quality consultant. It's more of an observation, and then I'd like the panel's view on the observation. Low Sea Communities was formed 5 years ago now, to address the disconnect between consultants and sustainable generation in operation. Invariably, history shows that when it's been applied, it doesn't generally work as it was expected to do so. The question then that I would like to raise is, in pioneering innovation in generation in the built environment, one of the major obstacles that we've faced is getting direct to the clients to educate them on the benefits of innovation. And to do that, invariably, we have to go through a raft of mainstream consultants who I shan't mention. Would the panel like to comment on what their views are in addressing that issue with the likes of BREEAM or CIBSE guidelines, which tend to direct mainstream consultants in one view, which possibly isn't the direction the country needs to follow.
Skills gap.
I think consultants have done quite well out of the green jobs boom. I think that's probably one of the real growth industries. And I actually don't have a direct comment on that question, but I do think kind of the services sector is a real competitive advantage for the UK economy across the board, in particular areas such as IT and construction, and consulting will have a big role to play there.
From my point of view and the feedback I've had from members, some mainstream consultancies do struggle to find good consultants that have that holistic knowledge across different systems, and they might be a specialist in contaminated land or in BREEAM or whatever, but having a more holistic approach to the issues that we're talking about is challenging, and I think there is a skills gap. Particularly with some of the issues that are coming up, the energy security issues and nuclear power, etc. There are issues where we need a more holistic approach to consultants.
Yeah, I've got a very low view of consultancy. Sorry, of course, some consultants are excellent. But in certain areas, the trouble is in cutting-edge technologies, consultants rely on the fact they have experts in the field. But if you're an expert in the field in a cutting-edge technology, you're going to be working in the industry. So the trouble is you get people coming along saying, I'm a consultant. And we get this a lot in AD, and I know that it happens in other areas, who say, I'm a consultant. They know far less than the companies they're actually meant to be judging all the technology. And half the time you've got trying to educate the consultant.
That's exactly been our experience in pioneering and innovation.
I think the thing is, the problem is that there's been a reliance on consulting as a way of taking knowledge out of house, and we've got to actually turn around to companies and say, in sustainability, you also have to build in-house expertise. And I don't think that's a saying that consultants don't have a role, because they do. But I think the problem is we have, over the last 20 years, outsourced so much that it's almost become an industry. And what we need, especially in sustainability, is to insource, so that we actually, so that if you're actually buying the product, you've got the knowledge base to work out whether the consultant is up to the role of acting as a consultant. But that's a personal view. I know there are some excellent consultants out there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope, sorry.
Thank you. Charlotte Danvers from the EEF, representing manufacturers. I just wondered, we've had a lot of discussion about carbon policies. In June, government announced their review of waste policies, and I just wondered whether the panel think that has set a right level of ambition with regards to resources, and whether it's a long-term strategy that we need.
Does anybody want to come in on that?
I will actually start with that, because the Environmental Industries Commission were quite heavily critical related to the waste review, and we met with Lord Henley, and I've had subsequent conversations with Lord Taylor as well, related to the details of the waste review. And we've also launched a campaign related to resource efficiency. In fact, one of our policy groups has actually renamed itself the Resource Efficiency and Waste Management Group, focusing on the issue around resource management. And we are launching a further campaign with Lord Taylor in the next couple of weeks to press him on the issue about resource efficiency and resource security. And we're in active dialogue with DEFRA on this issue.
I think one of the biggest problems is it's called the wrong thing. I think Rupert's presentation to begin with was very clear that waste is a resource, and our members are very interested in the concept of a circular economy and joining the dots so you don't throw anything away. And I think kind of that thinking is just not incorporated into the strategy.
I think the DEFRA review was disappointing, to say the least. The fact that there's been a fight between DEFRA and DCLG on collection strategies is an indication of, I'd love to say there's such a thing as joined up government, but it's one of the massive acronyms that you can ever come across. The problem, I think, is going to be resolved somewhat because most the Waste Directive is trying to deal with one of the issues that is never talked about, is that we've had 2 derogations to the Waste Directive. Can we actually have a third? I'm not sure without massive fines. Very interestingly, in the localism bill, a lot of people haven't spotted this, but localism bill, which might cause problems for building recycling infrastructure, there's a specific amendment that was put through by the government saying, if by turning this down, we then are fined under European law, we won't pay the bill, but the local authority will actually have to pay that bill. So I think that's rather funny because of it's sort of, under that planning law, it's going to be almost impossible to actually stop any, which is a good thing, waste infrastructure, because it's almost impossible to build near anybody because who wants it? I think the European framework is going to be the guiding influence, but perhaps we should actually also turn around and it might be seen as politically correct, but try and change the terminology of waste into resource, because it really clouds people's thinking. Classic one I came across was IKEA, who at their stores realised that all that packaging they had, which was cardboard, had value, and they actually turned it from a loss into a loss making to a profit making venture. That sort of idea for companies has to really take root. And I think the funny thing is coming back to some of the arguments about subsidy is a way of getting people to actually say, okay, it's not really financially possible to do that at the moment. If the government gives me a subsidy, I'll do it because suddenly it's in my financial interest. Well, raw material cost and energy cost means that you don't have to worry about subsidy because you've passed that threshold. And I think most companies are actually coming to terms with the fact that it is going to be an issue, especially when we talk about, in your presentation you were saying about the fact that gas is cheap. Everybody says we're going to pay through the nose for gas. Oh, yes, in 5 years' time we're going to look back at the halcyon days where gas was as cheap as it is today.
And so one of the major issues that we do have with resource efficiency is we actually don't know what's going on out there. In terms of each sector, the resource, we've been calling for resource efficiency benchmarks, so we can actually benchmark one sector against another on how efficient they actually are with their resources and waste, etc. And we've got very little detail about what's actually going on in the economy.
There is one thing which does annoy me somewhat, and it actually came up with the Sony presentation. I think it's excellent that you're sticking down an A rating, but I just find the paucity of information in an A rating system is ridiculous, because fridges, you can have an A-rated double-doored fridge, which you open the door and all the cold air falls out. But because the way it's actually rated, it gets an A rating because it's on the unit of insulation. The problem we have with electrical products is that you can have an A-rated telly under the present rules and sitting next to another A-rated telly, but if you actually looked at the electricity bill from the two, the gap is enormous. I would like to see a way that we could actually say average consumption, the units of average consumption. If we put that on the advertising next to tellies, as of law, as you do with CO2 on cars, you would change people's buying habits almost overnight. And I think it would be quite an attractive thing. Been working with a number of groups about a carbon unit system, but that would. One of the problems is actually giving the information to people out there so they can use it in a usable format. Just on that, there is going to be a very interesting, the carbon reduction commitment I think is going to drive a lot of business attitudes, because you're going to actually have to start doing carbon returns to the taxman and probably to Companies House. That will be a rather interesting benchmark opportunity. Oh, sorry. Do you, then down there? Oh no, well you could. It's up there now, so we've got time.
Hi, my name's Kate Hinton. I'm an environmental comms specialist that works at the PR network. I was very interested in the last two presentations in terms of what you've done to achieve all the environmental achievements across your companies. And what obviously it required a plethora of things to make those achievements. But what would you say has been the most significant driver? I was particularly interested in your environmental skills side. And then the second part of my question is more of a kind of political question around environmental skills in the UK. We often quote stats around the need for jobs in terms of the renewable sector and technologies, but very little has been said from government in terms of the broader environmental skills and how those are changing with much more senior roles, more environmental skills, much more management and so on. And I just wondered if you were aware of any government plans to actually assess the broader environmental skills that are really going to drive the green economy, and therefore what assessment there is in terms of the gaps and the jobs potential within that market, and how we're going to meet the gap.
Okay, to address your first question, so the major driver for our policy is basically first, we see ourselves as part of the society, and we need to contribute, and we know that the major footprint from our company is coming from our products, not from our operations. Mm-hmm. So we have to address that, because otherwise it turns negative to us, definitely. So this is a main motivation. And then depends also a little bit on the topic. So we mentioned that already in terms of energy saving. So this is a clear economic benefit also. If we save energy, we reduce our cost. And similar to resources, so resource security is very, very important. I heard that also in an earlier presentation. So we have exactly the same thing. We had a few months ago this discussion about rare earth and all that. So we see that for several materials, so we have to take care, and I fully agree that waste should be a resource, and that's why we have also this target of 99% recycling from our sites. So we will not allow landfill, for example. So at least it should be energy recovery, which is a kind of recycling, which is contributing to other to the gap in the energy we heard this morning. Yeah, those are basically the main drivers, and we as a consumer company need to raise awareness of the consumer as well. So, and we are everywhere in the shop, and we have to be a proactive company. The second question, I'm not sure what I can answer. So,
I would, yeah. I think from the perspective of what skills are required, it's less an argument on skills to me, it's more an argument on culture. The big change that I think, and the big enabler to make this work, is a concept of green as being normal. There's not long ago, do you remember being green used to be naive? And green now is, and if you were tarred with the environmental brush, you probably knit your own tea bags. The world has moved on, and it's a very positive moving on. It's a different arena, but it's now almost impossible to not get a fair trade banana. It's now almost impossible to get a vehicle which isn't advocating low carbon, or at least has a CO2 figure on it, because these are legislative requirements, and these are things that are now consumer requirements. When I was a child, the great environmental initiative was keep Britain tidy, don't throw it on the floor. We've moved a long way from don't throw it onto the floor to choose which particular bin you put it in. And the kids today are learning carbon footprint as part of their normal school education. So this is now normal stuff. And I see a culture change happening and a generational change. There's a lot of organisations claiming huge paper reduction, for example, because the generation which used to print off every email is now retired, rather than anything else. These changes are happening because culture is moving on. And so I would suggest that, but if we can harness this culture of energy coming through the new recruits, through kids who are leaving school, through university graduates, through the new ideas which are published through the media and the various other avenues which people get an idea of what culture is, then that would drive this sustainability agenda. It will enable people to make the right choices, whether it's a consumer choice, like on because they don't need to just say A, B, C. They can be intelligent and understand a more advanced mark. Or it may be that they're in a procurement role and they can make a sensible decision on what particular vendors they want to use. It may be they're in a planning department and they're making decision on their planning decisions. I don't see it so much as a skills having to sit in a college and learn. You have to motivate people to want to learn, and the way you motivate people to want to learn is make it desirable, and that's a culture change. So I'm very positive towards that culture change. I think it's happening, and I think that we just need to support it and enable it to happen. And that pessimism, which was marked on before, is probably the worst enemy.
I'll just add one other point, and it's really an observation in terms of the broader environmental skills. There has been a fundamental shift in the way government is approaching these things from the way I see it. Don't expect the government to come out with a big initiative about promoting skills and new kind of areas. It's for the industry to come up with the solutions, and I'm certainly hearing it, and I know the Aldersgate Group is as well. The government are asking us, what can we do to help promote the industry? Even this week, I was in Manchester, where working with a group called Clare on asbestos, where they're talking about certification of people certifying contaminated land and asbestos. The Green Deal assessors, these will be driven through government legislation and guidance, but it's for the industry to come up with the solutions.
And again, just on that broader question on skills and jobs, I think you're absolutely right to be a bit hesitant about classifying green jobs, because really the objective is a shift of the economy, so every single job is green. So in a sense, what's the point of counting that shift? I think we do need to see a green skills strategy, because we don't currently know where the big skills gaps are, and we need policy to address them. But I think what you'll generally find is we need more skills in science and engineering, and we also need those management and communication skills. And those are exactly the skills that have been holding back the UK for decades. They're nothing new. So it's kind of a reinvigoration of the government skills policy with I think more knowledge of what are those big green skills gaps in those technologies where the UK wants to lead.
Yeah, I think the problem at the moment is turning around to the government and saying, right, massive new initiative, because there is no money. So it's sort of like any department you say that to runs away. That's why I'm setting up the Carbon Management Association, because we're not taking government money. So suddenly they go, oh, we like that idea. You're not going to have any money off us. I think there's an interesting political aspect to this, is the word green. Green is now the name of a political party. Caroline Lucas, done very well, excellent, but it has political associations. I think when we're talking about sustainability, it's really the carbon agenda we're talking about. And I think there is a difference between the carbon and the green agenda. When you start talking about carbon and you start talking about costs, you're the finance directors involved, and you can actually get money for training people. When you talk about green, what has made me slightly cynical is the greenwash that has taken place at so many levels over the years. And when you talk about green, it's amazing how often you end up talking to somebody in marketing or PR rather than somebody who has a degree in environmental management. That's just an observation. But I think the funny thing is that there is an emphasis on looking at how we actually increase this. There isn't the money at the moment that is for a massive new initiative.
Thank you for two very optimistic and encouraging presentations from Thomas and Simon. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Goodfellow-Smith. I run a consultancy. I've been a consultant on and off for several decades, actually. I've done other jobs as well. Quest for Future Solutions. I've got two main questions, please, for both Thomas and Simon. First of all, on the individual behaviours that you've been effecting through your businesses, and just how much of a catalyst they actually become in their local communities. And Simon, you gave us some insight into that. And I'm just wondering about those positive messages coming from industry, communicated into community, and then back up to those big blocks to sustainable development, the local authority. You remember those emailers that have retired? They've not, they've just moved. They're in the local authorities. In terms of sustainable innovation, I was wondering what both Thomas and Simon particularly had to say about the ideas around continual improvement and innovation, or radical change and innovation. And if I may just put my consultancy head on for a moment, I have to just say that carbon does not equal sustainable development, sir. It's much, much bigger. Sustainable development is a critical definition that we seem to be watering down and sticking into everything. Carbon is just one little fraction of it. Head off, and that was free.
Okay, in terms of continuous improvement or radical changes, I mean, I have presented a road to zero that implies already we need radical changes. So far, we had a kind of continuous improvement. And that's why we changed our policy to see what do we need to achieve by a certain year to be on track on the road to zero. Yeah, but definitely this is a big challenge. And we started now to reconsider what kind of significant changes do we need to apply. And to be very honest, so far we are still somehow on the track of continuous improvement. Maybe except for few initiatives like the renewable energy, so 100% electricity, is not only to reduce our carbon footprint, to have an impressive figure here, but also we do it basically to trigger the market, to create a demand in that industry to generate more renewable energy. And of course we pay a premium here, so we do that as part of our commitment and to trigger some radical changes. But still, I agree, we have to do much more on that. And we have to come up with innovative solutions to reduce further, in particular for waste and water consumption also. Yeah, the first one, I'm not sure whether I fully got your message, your question. Individual behavior of whom actually?
Yes, really I was interested in the way that your work with your staff has led to them acting as a catalyst, almost a breakthrough innovator in their own communities. Okay. Whether you can help that further, whether you can assist local authorities in making the significant changes they need to make.
Yes, we have some initiatives also dealing with communities. Also, it is depending on the site, so we have different site activities. So they engage minimum once a year with the communities, but it's just once a year. But in general, we also have they act as a catalyst. Definitely, if I speak for the site I'm working in, is in Stuttgart. So we have this bike to work, and we could trigger basically also other companies to join in. So we have the facilities for that, and other companies are interested in this. The same, we have also some solar panels on our roof. So we invited basically the companies surrounding us to have a look and to understand why we did that, how we did that, and so on. So we try to share our message with the community. And I had one example also in my presentation, which was the Earth Hour. So basically we motivated our people to participate here as well. It's very difficult to estimate basically what was the impact really, but we try definitely.
Community impact is hard to measure, fundamentally. We use qualitative measures for our impact that our employees have in the community. The Green Ambassadors Programme is our main agent for doing that, which is basically we have support to staff to change their own lifestyle, to make reductions in their energy bill. Do you remember about 2009 when all gas bills were going like that and electricity bills were going like that, and all of a sudden we were all going to be panicking because it was going to £1 a litre for fuel? Do you remember those days when £1 a litre was going to be expensive? We launched Green Ambassadors as a response to that, fundamentally to say, we've saved money as a business, you can save money at home. But once you've done that, you've got to go into your local communities and do community transformation. So that was the mechanism we did to drive that into the community. And there was some, we had people setting up farmers markets and those kind of things, and engaging in transition town movements. We had one lady who door knocked her entire neighbourhood and got them all to do cavity wall insulation on the same day so she could get a bargain discount. They were nice things, and they were very, very important for the local communities. But for one of the struggles we had, and this is where I think it was in connecting that with the other initiatives that were happening at the company level through our public sector customers, where we were talking to them through carbon reduction programs and all those kind of things that we were trying to engage with them at. Trying to connect the two together was actually quite difficult because they're different scales. And we found it often that the local authorities wanted to do initiatives, but they lacked the resource to do it themselves. The communities wanted to do the initiatives, but they lacked the contacts in the council to connect. So that's one of the areas we did there. To your continual improvement or radical change, I would suggest that continual improvement only makes sense when you're avoiding pollution and doing the bad stuff. Continual improvement is removing nasties. I suggest that if you want to do good stuff, then radical change is the way forward. Putting a flag in the sand and saying we are going to do something amazing is inspiring. It's the stuff which makes people interested. If you want to get people excited, you don't say to them, we're going to do step by step. You get people excited and energized by showing a great vision. You show them something really powerful. You get someone like Franny Armstrong to come and do some inspirational speech. You do something which really connects and engages. You get everybody to... We had one day when we got some electric skateboards and electric bikes in. The electric skateboard is probably the most dangerous vehicle ever invented by humans, but it really connected with people because they had fun, they enjoyed it, it was enjoyable, and it energized it, and that launched our whole don't drive to work, use an alternative mode of transport. And we had people skating in, and we had people doing other silly things, but it drove a program which then led to massive reductions in our commuting and carbon sense. We're talking big numbers, but you can only make those changes if you really inspire people and drive them forward.
Time for a couple more questions. Just on that point, though, you have to be slightly careful. You have to understand costs and community. Doing a lot of work on the cost of the internet at the moment. If you send an email with an attachment, it's 4 grams of carbon. We sent 107 trillion emails around the world. If you start putting that together, just to look at the figures, I'm doing the figures at the moment. It's really difficult to do, but it's between 6 and 10% of our electricity supply is used running our servers and our data centers. Yep. And the big problem there is we dump all this data. We only retrieve between 1 and 3% of it, yes, but it's being kept live. So even if you delete an email, it's on a server. So you could actually, funnily enough, at the moment you have somebody going, right, I'm going on a charity run to save carbon, and sending a picture which goes viral around everybody in the office. Now, before too long, how long is that going to be a fireable offence? Because once you start working out the energy costs and the storage costs and the carbon costs and the taxation costs, you could actually end up with a very large figure. Mm-hmm. But the big problem is knowing what the cost of the carbon is, because I raised that with OCG, Office of Central Government. And you've got a big problem because they don't even calculate a lot of the stuff they're sticking on servers. Yes. Just another point here. Under the CRC, this could be a really good one because if nobody's even thought of this. Under the CRC, you're responsible for your carbon take. But if you then stick all the data onto a data center somewhere else, are you avoiding that carbon, even if it's overseas? Now, if you do that, as it's a tax now, not a levy, if you do that with money, you're seen as tax avoiding. At what point are you going to actually say CRC should actually be on your data held in other people's data centers? Because it's your data.
May I just, when I was with Forum for the Future, 1997-9, we did a little study with Royal Mail on... Oh, thank you. Sorry, I used to be director with Forum for the Future. We did a study with Royal Mail on the carbon impact of 2 sides of A4 in the Post compared to the email of the 1990s. And after 4 pages of A4, you better post it. That was the carbon impact then. Now, I'm sure the carbon impact is less now by email, but that report, although outdated now, might be useful. I'll dig it out and send it to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, we're going to use email. But the thing is, most people in the room wouldn't think that sending an email had a carbon cost. Well, maybe in this room they do, but most people don't. And that's actually quite worrying. Sorry.
We have a division which does that. They spend their entire time measuring the carbon footprint of data centres and then improving them, and it is scary, the figures that come out. We just had a recent conversation with not a massive legal firm, relatively small regional legal firm, and it's £30,000 in electricity bill saved from just very, very simple changes to their data centre. And as you say, storage, the virtualisation of storage is the latest story in that one. And using simple things like don't put everything on tape and keep it on the disk. Once you've got it on tape and it needs to be archived, don't store it on the disk. A project which I'm aware of enabled them to switch off 700 servers, which were simply saving the data, which was which hadn't been used for over a year. Now I don't know how much 700 servers is in space, but I do know how much that is in energy.
Yeah, the same applies for us. Basically, we do exactly the same because it's also a financial impact. It's not only the power consumption of your server themselves, but you need to cool the room, and this is another one. So we really have to reduce this, and we also look into that one. But maybe coming back also to the point regarding catalyst. So actually, being in a European function. We do a lot of lobbying basically on the European policies, which translate in the end into local legislation, and municipalities and so on also have to follow. So what we do as Sony here is so we lobby actually for proactive legislation, European framework directives or regulation, and that's how we influence that also, basically bringing that outside of our company. And the A to the G label was mentioned, so we lobbied for that one because we wanted the consumer to compare and to see, and this has an impact everywhere in Europe, and actually even Russia is now is copying that label. Here our lobbying effort is now that they harmonize with the European label because we don't want to have an extra label in Russian. But so this is something which we do. And to address your concern, that's true. So 2A rated TVs could have a different environmental impact and energy bill, but actually the consumption is on the label as well. So the consumer can compare if he looks into the details. So the annual energy consumption is there, like also the standby power consumption and so on. So there are data. Yeah. Not only the color.
Right. Well, I think we've run out of questions. Can I thank everybody on the panel on your behalf, and can I also thank you for the questions this morning, and welcome you to lunch.